So,
This meeting is being recorded.
all right, Mike, if you want to start us out with announcements, please.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the monthly Zoom that we've been doing with NDSOS, courtesy of Dr. Steve Johnson. Look forward to our Zoom meeting this morning. Before we get started, just a couple of quick things. I've sent out a couple of emails recently, and North Dakota Center for Distance Ed would really like your help on some surveys. I know there's some problems clicking on some of those things, but I think that's been corrected. Looking for some feedback on course offerings. I think they're also looking for some feedback on whether or not driver's education is still needed, if that course is still needed. So if you need and you want those things, or you have an opinion, please click on those surveys. And then we have an event coming up December 1st, and I maybe won't visit about that a whole lot because I think Diana will share some about that. But we're going to have a panel discussion, and Ben Winchester will be the guest for UND. And if you want the opportunity to tune into that, I'll send out some more information on that also. But Diana will probably talk a little bit about that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Johnson, and he can introduce our guest.
Well, we have with us today Diana Pavlovich, doctor from the UND of the I-Read Center, the newly formed center up there. And so we have an opportunity for her to talk to us today about what the exciting things they have going on at the University of North Dakota and the new formed initiative for rural education, equity, and economic development. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Diana.
All right, well, hello. It is so great to be with all of you. Now, Steve, do you want me to share my screen for the slides, or do you?
I've got it.
You're on it. Okay. If you want, you could go to view and full screen. And that should just make it nice. Just towards the bottom, full screen mode. There you go.
There we go.
There you go. All right. Well, it's great to be with all of you. So I have some slides. I'm so happy to see I've got members of my team in here. I'll introduce them in a little bit. But as far as I'm concerned, Steve and Mike, you let me know the format you like best, but I'm totally comfortable if anybody wants to hop in with a thought or a question as we go, or if you prefer to save it for the end, whatever sounds good.
Yeah, we have a pretty small group here. So I think questions, they can throw them in the chat if they feel not comfortable, but they can just turn their mics on and go from there.
Yeah, I would just have them chime in.
That would be great. All right, so we're happy to be here. We can go to the next one. All right, so this is what we'll talk a little bit about. I'm going to tell you who we are, what our goals are, talk about some current projects that we have. I'll share two projects with you, one on teacher recruitment and retention, and another on juvenile justice reforms. And then I'll talk a little bit about some future projects that we have, and then talk about that event that Mike mentioned, and talk just about partnerships, about ways we can sort of build together, but maybe that'll make more sense after I talk about who we are. So, all right, we can go to the next slide, Steve. So maybe before I tell you, who each of us is, our mission here, I think it really starts from this understanding that universities have not really been serving our communities well. That research has been this kind of thing that we hoard, and we, earn the reputation a bit of our own irrelevance. And so the goal of I-Read is to create active partnerships, to be useful, and to use research in a way that is sustaining and meaningful to our partners in various contexts. For me, our primary partners are involved in education, but there's obviously lots of ways to do that. So that's kind of the big idea. And then when it comes, so I-Read is the initiative for rural education, equity, and economic development. It starts with an understanding that we really want to prioritize rural education, rural educators, rural students. And I think more than that, we come at this from a perspective that rural education and rural education policy is not just urban education light, and also that rural education isn't one size fits all. So a lot of our projects are really trying to show the diversity of contexts, of needs, of all the things across rural school settings. In addition to that, we're thinking about the relationship between schools and the communities that they serve. You know, I think this would have been a harder sell maybe for non-educators before COVID. After COVID, everyone is like, oh yeah, no, I totally understand what you mean when you say that schools are hubs of the community and their communities rely on them for nutrition, for social services, for all kinds of things. And so for us, we're not just thinking about what happens in a classroom, but we're thinking about how the larger community shapes those dynamics, both how the community shapes what happens in the schools, but also how what happens in the schools might shape the communities, right? In positive ways, hopefully. That's one thing too. We really want to focus on positive things. The second goal of ours is to be oriented around building partnerships. We do not want to go to really any district with sort of a question that is just our own, right? Like, and this idea that researchers exist to study something or someone is not something that we want any part of. We really do want meaningful partnerships. The questions that we ask stem from, or the questions that we engage stems from the questions that our partners are curious about and that they want to know about. And then we can together form studies that can answer those questions. The other thing and related to that is our research is really focused on solution-oriented research, right? Not these just broad ideological questions, which are important and valuable for sure, but also really with pertinence and relevance to folks on the ground. And then the last is deliverables. So we're really focused on once we do this research, then what? You know, and so maybe publishing and all of that is a part of it eventually if our partners are interested in that, but also preparing policy briefs, preparing presentations, preparing one-page infographics, things that are really tangible. And so, you know, we've been fortunate to work with all of you in NDSOS. We also have worked with small individual schools or districts. And so we really are interested in a variety of different partnerships. That's, well, we can go to the next one, Steve. So this is our core team of who we are. I'm the director of IREAD. I was brought on a few years ago to create this initiative. And my work centers on education policy and reform, and a lot of it is on teacher policy. We are very fortunate this year to have Caitlin Brecklin with us, who is Dr. Caitlin Brecklin, who is a postdoctoral research fellow and has deep expertise in qualitative research and education policy. And she just finished her PhD last spring from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And then we have a group of graduate researchers. So you can see here we have Mackenzie, Richard, and Kevin. And that is our core team. But the model of IREAD is that so this core team will be involved in everything, but this core team can't do everything. Instead, we draw on kind of the very rich faculty that we have in the College of Education at UND, and then also beyond it if necessary. So, you know, my expertise is in a particular area. If there are questions that folks are asking that I can't engage, we bring in more folks, right? So we have folks who are focused on literacy and science education, in higher education, in social emotional learning and counseling. And so we're able to create teams that are specific to the questions our partners want to know about. Any questions so far? Probably not.
Anna,
Yeah.
can they introduce themselves? They're all on here. They
I would
turn
love
on their,
that.
turn
That
on
would be
their videos.
wonderful.
So we
Yeah,
can,
no, all right, well, good. I hope I'm putting you all on the spot, but if you don't mind, yeah, Caitlin, Mackenzie, Richard, Kevin, do you? Caitlin, you want to go ahead first?
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm really excited to be part of the IREAD team, and I am really excited to be working on the projects that Diana's going to share about. Yeah, happy to be here.
Hi, y'all. I'm Mackenzie. I'm in my last year of my PhD program. This is my second year on the IREAD team. And it's been just such an amazing experience working with rural educators. I come from a very small town of 200 in northern Wisconsin. So rural is near and dear to my heart. And I'm just have been so grateful to work with all of the participants we've had so far.
Hi, everyone. I'm Richard, coming out of, well, I'm first year at UND, and I was a high school teacher in Fargo until last year. So off to a good start, really enjoying the team, and it's good to be here.
Hey folks, I'm Kevin. Also like Richard in my first year here at UND, and also like Richard, a former teacher myself. I taught junior high for 8 years. So the experiences of the classroom and schools are still very near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to work with all of you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's been a real joy of the project to have such a great team. And then to get to work with so many of you across the state has been at a basic level, just a lot of fun. You know, it's been it's been a really good part of the workday. So, all right. Okay. So I want to talk about two of the projects that we have going on right now. So the first one I'll talk to you about is teacher recruitment and retention. So, you know, it's no news that this is a longstanding issue. It's particularly pertinent now. This came to us, this topic, you know, obviously lots of educators were very concerned about this. And then at UND, Sherry Hodak got a grant from Sherry Hodak, and we can save the other one for just another minute. Or it's fine, Steve, it doesn't really matter. Sherry Hodak had gotten a grant from the Rural Schools Collaborative, and part of that went to pilot different programs that would support teacher recruitment and retention. And part of that funding came to us in iRead to do a study with rural educators to learn about their experiences and their thoughts about what is happening and how we can deal with it. So we partnered with 10 different rural districts across the state. All were small, and we had 2 phases. We had a phase of surveys and we had a phase of interviews. So we had a lot of data to work with, and we are still analyzing that data right now, and we'll be working on some reports and probably some publications with this. But I do have some findings that I want to share that I thought really rose to the top and were really striking to me. So you know, maybe not incredibly surprising, but I thought really powerful. So the first one is that there were different ideas about the value of being in a rural area among administrators and teachers, right? So the ways that administrators saw rural spaces was not necessarily how the teachers we spoke to understood it. So some of the teachers, you know, the idea of being in a close-knit community and things like that was not necessarily appealing. Like at the end of the day, I kind of just want to be alone. I don't want to be seen by everybody. So that was interesting to think about this nuanced idea of the different ways we understand it. But the other thing that was really important was that these community amenities and housing was incredibly important to teachers. About a space to live, a space to afford, a space to be able to create a life, which really goes beyond a lot of the conversations we see, especially when we think about education policy sort of from a national perspective around teacher recruitment and retention. Also, there was a debate among our participants, or a divergence, I should say, about, you know, was being in a rural community that was somehow proximate to an urban community a good thing or not? For some, it was great, right? You're close to Target and you're close to restaurants and shops. But for others, this was a way for excellent teachers to be poached away by larger districts. So there was a whole conversation there. The other thing that emerged that was really important for us was that COVID-19 was a key theme here. Teachers are talking about the intensification of their work, that they're under an enormous amount of stress. They feel that their responsibilities have increased, but their, you know, their support has not necessarily. And that even as the pandemic seems to maybe be under control, they didn't necessarily feel a waning of some of that. Instead, it felt like this new normal. You know, and there was also a divide that our research team picked up, that for administrators, some of the stress of COVID was offset because they saw this influx of dollars coming in from the federal government. So that kind of felt like, well, we can do some exciting things. For teachers, they felt like that never really made its way to them. And so they were just struggling. There was a new study that came out earlier this week that showed that teachers are reporting higher levels of stress than healthcare workers. And that's definitely what the teachers who participated with us were suggesting. And then the last big finding I want to share with you today is about compensation. And again, the sort of differences between how administrators and teachers were understanding the issue. So many of the administrators we spoke with were very proud of things like the retirement packages and those kinds of things they could offer to teachers. The teachers did not seem to value those. They felt that this idea of, retirement benefits that's going to happen way down the line felt like out of sync with their needs now, right? But I need money for my mortgage. I need money for my student loans. I need an immediacy, right? And it also suggested these different ways of understanding the teacher core, right? This idea of a teacher who comes in to stay for a career is not necessarily how some of our teachers are understanding it right now. So those are some of the big ideas. I want to give a minute. First of all, if anyone from the research team wants to add more detail, or if there are any questions on that, I can give folks a moment.
Diana, I'd have one question. Was those feelings of the teachers that you spoke to consistent across the different age groups of teachers that you spoke with? Was it different for a younger teacher first 5 years as opposed to someone who's been in the profession for, say, 15 plus?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. And that's part of what we're doing now is breaking it down even further, not just administrators versus teachers, but we're looking at generation, we're looking at context, but that is an issue that younger teachers are understanding it differently. Caitlin, I saw you turned your camera on. Did you want to add anything else there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we can say right now that older teachers definitely seem to be more aware of their retirement benefits, which makes sense, right? They're closer. We even talked to some teachers who were just hanging on for the retirement benefits. Whereas younger teachers, at least in my understanding right now, younger teachers are not really thinking about that as much, which again makes intuitive sense. And we need to tease out if that's just an age thing or if that's really a change in the way that people are thinking about the career.
Yeah. Another question, did you see any difference about the benefits package you had other than retirement? I had noticed in my 46 years career that health insurance is becoming a huge issue, even for the young ones who are coming out of college and may still be under their mom and dad's health insurance, and then they reach that magical age of 26 and then that's gone. And so health has got to be a bigger issue. And then of course I've seen it on the other end where they wanted to quit, they wanted to retire, but they didn't feel they could do that because health insurance was such a burden on their family that they kept working.
Yeah. And
in some cases, they just kept their job. They weren't really working. They just kept their job for the health insurance.
Yeah, that's a good question. Caitlin, do you remember, did health insurance specifically come up?
For off the top of my head, it definitely did in at least a couple cases. I'm thinking of one in particular where, again, the health insurance was a primary reason for the person to keep their job. I can't say more than off the top of my head. I can't speak to that really any deeper.
Yeah, I think that one of the interesting points is that for younger teachers that we're trying to recruit in, I think they're thinking about their career in different ways, right? The longevity of it. And it's these immediate benefits that seem to be carrying much more weight than maybe a generation ago that somebody would have. And maybe that's for a variety of reasons, that it's just speculation, but a generation ago, housing prices were not quite the same. Maybe there were more opportunities, but for teachers right now, the ones that we were talking to and nationally, there seems to be a sort of sense of, but what right now is a recruitment incentive. All right, we can go to the next project and we'll have a report to share. I can share that with Steve and Mike, and you all can share that as you like. This is a project I'm really excited to share with you because it really came directly out of a conversation that I had with Mike, and is benefiting from all of your support. So it's a good example. I don't really remember how we first got connected, Mike, but we met to talk about iRead. I don't remember when this happened, and then Steve, how the order of all of it, but we were talking about what iRead could do. And you sort of brought up like, well, hey, if you're interested in wondering about an issue that's affecting rural spaces, rural schools in different ways, how about juvenile justice reform? And so that wasn't on our radar at all. But as we started to look more, it was a really interesting question. So in the last couple of years, there's been reform to juvenile justice. There's been reform to juvenile justice at the state level. And this is one of these interesting spaces where juvenile justice reform is typically understood to be really positive things. We don't want kids in institutions. We don't want them out of their communities and out of their schools. But in most cases, we're not thinking about the kind of resources that our smaller schools, particularly our rural schools, maybe have or don't have to sustain this kind of thing. So the question here is that as we have these changes to legislation, but don't really have sort of a paired change to resources or policy about practice, how is it affecting folks on the ground? And so our big questions here that we'll get to are not just sort of impact and a descriptive analysis of what is happening, but also how is this affecting things like mental health in the schools? How does this maybe tie to teacher recruitment and retention? One of the early things that we're hearing is like, yeah, of course, it's just another stressful thing. Oh, I see in the chat, there's another, okay, I'm gonna let that go and we circle back. So this project has two phases. So the first phase is a survey that many of you probably received and participated in. We had a great response rate, 70%, which is pretty fantastic for a survey. And we had all the regions of the state represented. So we feel really confident about the data that we have. And then the next phase will be focus group interviews. And I'll talk about those after, but I want to share with you all some of those preliminary findings that we have. So we can go to that next one. So the first thing that we see that really sort of supports this idea that rural education is not one size fits all, because rural communities are not one size fits all, is that there's a lot of variation across the state. And I think it's important to point that out. So for one, it really makes these focus group interviews that we're going to do really important so we can understand what's actually happening in different places. But it also shows how problematic these sort of one size fits all approaches can be, because that's not how it's being experienced. The next issue that we found sort of relates together with this information divide and uncertainty. And it really supports this idea that many of us know intuitively, which is that decisions are often made without educators at the table. And that in some ways we become sort of an afterthought. So 60% of our participants, so our school principals and our superintendents who participated in the survey, were either not familiar or only slightly familiar with these legislative changes. So there was a lack of clarity about what was happening across the state, but even more so, there was a lack of clarity about what that meant for school leaders. Right? What are they supposed to do given these changes? So about half of our survey respondents said they were not sure what they were supposed to do, if anything, under this new context. And then I think the last thing I want to share, so there's an information discrepancy that is easier to attend to, but then this last one is a resource discrepancy that is also really important. Our participants were pretty clear that they did not have the resources within their schools or within their districts to support this change. That they felt, the majority of them felt they would have to look outside of the school, and the majority of our superintendents felt they would have to look outside of the district to get support. And I think one of the most powerful findings was that over half of our participants said that the only way they're able to support these changes is to take away resources from other priorities and projects already in play. So it really does sort of confirm this this idea that there is a very limited pot of funds. And as we ask more for our schools and our educators, it's not necessarily feasible. So I think what we're going to do soon after we're doing a few more rounds of analysis on what we have. And then right around Thanksgiving, either before or after, we will get about a white paper, a policy brief, and then we'll prepare a one-page overview of the findings that all of you can share with your elected representatives and whoever else you feel to advocate for more. And then the second phase of this project with the focus groups will be really powerful. And we hope to do that probably in January. And from there, we're going to, again, talk to our administrators, but also talk to teachers and counselors to get a better understanding of how all of this is shaping their day-to-day experiences. And after that, we'll prepare another round of the same kinds of documents I just talked about. So I don't know if the research team has anything else they want to add or questions about this. We'd be happy to chat about it. All right.
Mike, you came off mute. Do you have something?
No, I was just coming off mute to maybe comment at some point. I'm formulating a thought, Dr. Johnson.
Okay. Okay. When you're out hunting and it's blizzard out, you've got a lot of thoughts. I know.
Yeah, I know. Well, one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about the focus groups, Diana, and those focus groups will be meeting, I guess, in January. Mm-hmm. Part of what I wanted to do, and I think was important because we are in a legislative year, is to use as much of this data to go back and share with our legislators and those people who are making decisions in this regard. So, and letting them know that the juvenile justice changes that were implemented, the new CHINS, I think, system as it's called, doesn't have the resources in it to serve our rural communities. And we have specifically heard superintendents say they would just as soon at this point, if they're not going to ramp up the services in our rural areas, many of our superintendents are saying they would rather have dollars given to them so they can provide the services in the schools rather than having no service available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the kind of information we'll get from the information that you have put together in this survey, but also from the focus groups. I'm a little worried, to be honest, that the focus groups are going to be happening in January, and hopefully we can get that data back quickly so that we can use that data also.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we agree, and we'll do our best to move quickly and hope that many of you will be able to participate, and we'll be calling on you once again, I should say too, to reach out to your teachers to share the invitation that we'll have with them. And we are able, I should have said, so we have support from NDSOS, we have support from NDCDE, and we have support from the Bergham Foundation for this project. And a big chunk of that support is going to go to incentives for participants to join us for the focus groups, because we realize we're asking for time. And so we're hoping to compensate for that time that folks are participating. I'm seeing a question. Has this group reached out to Stacey Duffield? Let me pull it back up. All right. June teacher recruitment, a couple of small groups. We haven't been in touch, but we really do want to partner across institutions. If you have any ideas, if you think that would be a wise thing to do, we can certainly do that. And particularly when we have the reports, we'll be thinking about what are the right audiences to share those with.
Yeah, I think Stacey would be one for you guys to reach out for, or reach out with. She's done quite a bit of work since June, trying to come up with ideas how, and really like what's higher ed's role in the recruitment and the retention piece of it, and just trying to think about how they can work with the legislature this winter and try to get some state funding for some of the ideas that have been laid out there and things like that. So I think it'd be worth your guys' time. I think she'd love to work with you in any way that she could.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks for that.
So the teacher retention and recruitment seminar that was done this summer, and Dave was at that, I was at that, Stacy Duffield was instrumental in that. They had smaller focus groups, and that group has also come up with some findings about what it is that needs to be done. We talked a little bit about this the other day, Diana, and really came down with 3 or 4 things. That the first one was mentoring is critical to keep teachers in the field, and the second had to do with 2, 3, and 4 in my mind all had to deal with compensation in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I do think that there should be that conversation.
Yeah.
Diana, I worked with Stacy last legislative session,
mm-hmm.
and the group, which is called the North Dakota Association of College Teaching,
mm-hmm.
the accreditation group of all, including UND. And there was a lady from UND, a professor from UND that was on that committee, and we did present some legislation, but it died in session because North Dakota has this big issue when it comes to equity, and they just really didn't like to see the rural schools getting more money.
Mm-hmm.
So in a nutshell, that's what it ended up being. And that was kind of a teacher, it had to deal with placing teachers outside there, because if you get, a lot of times, if I can get a student teacher in a rural school, I can hire them before they get done with their service. But one of the issues that they have, the major issue, is it's economics, because they can't keep an apartment in Fargo and then live in Ray, North Dakota, doing their student teaching and pay for 2 different rent situations. So a lot of that scholarship money was for housing and living expenses.
Yeah.
So, but it failed. So yeah, Stacy, I don't know her role in that now, because she's moved out into the, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave and Mike, but I think she's moved into the overall professional development for NDSU instead of the education department. Isn't she? Yeah.
I think she may have switched titles, but I think she's still pretty active in the teacher ed part of it.
Yeah.
We've had plenty of conversations about just how many they currently have ready to graduate. And we've had a lot of conversations, like you said, like I've got a student teacher coming in from UND to do 1st grade this spring. And it's because I know I'm going to have at least 1 opening in the spring. And I want this person in the building because I want to be able to seal the deal before June. Really, honestly, like I had an opening in 5th grade last year. I had 3 applications. We interviewed every one of them. And we were lucky to get 3. I really believe that. And we're 12 miles from UND. We're 45, 50 miles from Mayville State. Like, yeah, anything we can do to get them in our building early has kind of become a priority for us up here too.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things we're trying to do. A couple of things we're trying to do. One, I think it's build partnerships at UND that go beyond just Grand Forks. So try and sort of not just research partnerships, but as you'll see with the next project, these sort of curricular partnerships that bring our student teachers out into the broader state. But then also using research to legitimize these findings. So I think, elected officials, politicians can often be dismissive of like, oh, that's just your experience. But we're really hoping that when we can put data to it, also it paints some of this in a different picture, even though to this group, none of it is surprising. I think presented in that way, it becomes just an extra sort of like tool in the arsenal. Yeah. All right. Well, we can go to this next one. So this stems from our teacher recruitment and retention research. It's also part of a larger commitment of the university and the college to think about the teacher shortages. So one of the initiatives that we're thinking about is sort of, it fits with this grow your own, everything that you all have been saying. How do we get students early? How do we get them excited about becoming a teacher? And this happens in there are multiple different factors that we're thinking about. So one is, how do we get those high school students to be thinking about becoming teachers and excited about becoming teachers? But then also, how do we bring programming to them when they're not necessarily close to some of the universities and things like that? So the JET program is a project we're thinking about centering some work on starting in the spring and going over the next year. And we'd like to create some partnerships with rural districts across the state, either places that already have programs in place or ones that don't. And what we'd like to do is really use this as a place to create a university district partnership where maybe the university is creating a series of asynchronous online modules that students can take. And then that would mean that the district or a teacher at the district level or the school would supervise with the clinical observations, right? Because in high school, it's really just, oh, Steve, you're a member of the JET. Yeah, I mean, it's a great program. And what we're hoping is to create a kind of core of future teachers across the state. We're trying to get some funding from the university where we're not just bringing this program to schools, but we're able to maybe bring the students together to campus to get them excited about becoming a teacher, right? All the great things they can learn about and get them excited about that. So it would be implementing that program. The research component of it that we're really excited about is having the potential to interview high school students about their perceptions of teaching as a career. Because I think we all have kind of ideas, but there's not a lot of work out there that really shows us, are high school students thinking about becoming a teacher? Why or why not? How does that fit with their future ambitions and aspirations? And then how can we do a better job as educators, as policymakers, to make teaching fit their hopes and desires? So if anybody is interested in partnering with us in this, we're hoping to sort of build some of those relationships and to create programs that are specific to the needs and wants of each school or district, rather than kind of just a generic thing. But that's kind of a big picture of where we are on that. I don't know if there are other questions about this, or if anybody seems interested in that, or if there are other projects that you'd like us to take on. And then I'll talk a little bit about that event that we have coming up.
Diane, I have a question about that. I'm Janelle from Carrington. So are we able to come and I don't know if UND has this already, but I'm just thinking of how we can promote our own schools to reach like some of our UND students. I have 2 kids that attend UND, and I know they have kids that are in friends that are in education or different things. And just, my background is I've been in Fargo for 12 years, and then now I'm in Carrington, and just kind of highlighting the differences and, what the rural setting also has to offer. Because I feel like when they're in school, their big thing is, we want to head to Grand Forks, Fargo, Bismarck, hit the big ones. And, just the opportunity that I have found myself just from watching what our teachers do here. I mean, I really would love for them to see that, because as a new teacher, I think there are so many benefits that the rural setting has to offer.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's definitely what we're seeing too. I think in some ways, the partnerships and relationships that have been there have been ones of convenience, right? Like it's just easy, we're local, yep, and we don't have to figure out all those logistics. But I think that if there's a meaningful way to think about, like Steve was saying, with housing, is there a way that, we can be creative? Right now, it's hard because we say, all right, go out and do your internship, but it's far away. How do we make that work? But I think one of the things we're really thinking about in the college is how to create more online offerings so that we're serving people better. And then I think this is a place to involve the state. How can we use funds to create, like things like that, like housing, like these temporary, because it's not just money for housing, it's also space for housing.
Right.
I was working, I think I was in some of those meetings with Stacy very early before the pandemic. And we had one superintendent come talk to us about how, there was no space in his area right now to have somebody, but he had a finished basement, right, where he could host somebody, which is like a lovely offer. It really is. But also you think about, a 20-year-old. And so it's also, yep. So I think there are the really solvable issues that we can, right? We hear that from our students too. They love rural areas. They see the benefit of it. I think it's just not set up structurally to support that.
Right. I would agree with that.
Diana, that might have been me because
No, it wasn't.
we had a long-term sub, advanced math. She was on maternity leave, and I found one in Vallis City that just graduated with a math major, and I let him stay in my home.
Wow.
For the time that he took her place on the leave of absence, free of charge. And my wife didn't think it was such a great idea, but pretty soon she was making him supper every night that he came home. So yeah, it worked out really well.
Oh gosh. Well, it wasn't you who mentioned it, but so that's an N of 2. There's got to be more, right? But I think in some ways, without the supports, we're asking educators on both ends, administrators and prospective teachers, to kind of do these Herculean tasks that we're not asking educators in more urban or larger spaces to do. And that, I think, is a fairness and equity issue, if we frame it that way.
So, hello, my name is Leslie Bieber, and I'm the superintendent of Alexander Public School. And we currently own, I'm a landlord of 14 homes.
Wow.
And that's how we resolved our issue. My board continually talks about getting out of the housing business. But yet, where are they going to go to? So I finally have them convinced that, yes, I would like to get out of the housing business myself. However, it's going to be another 8 to 10 years. And I'm in the Northwest where there's growth continually.
Yeah.
So, and now we're looking at another expansion, and I'm looking at one of my duplexes thinking I gotta get rid of that just to have playground area. And so it's luckily enough for us, we had some grants to purchase some of the homes. Otherwise our rent has made our payments. So
wow.
That's
it's wonderful.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so were those state grants, or were those just sort of local?
Those were right. Those were straight state grants, oil and gas impact grants.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's lots of space to innovate in that area. I think we think about compensation as, flat salary. And I think what we're hearing from teachers is there are a lot of other factors that matter. Salary is important, but housing is probably the most.
Diana, Tyler Hanson, Superintendent Edgeley, how are you?
Hi there.
Hey, I think we already have structures in place to make this happen, and Edgeley Public School would be willing to assist you in making this happen. We're intentional in regards to a career and tech education, specifically in a cooperative work experience where we have students on our campus right now, whether that be in the first grade room teaching this afternoon or going to the local veterinarian to be the next vet. So I would be willing to explore this with you. I think our career in tech is a place where we would start. They've got a great structure in place already. I also think there's opportunities where we could bridge that rural teacher opportunity with our resident teacher programs and how we can combine a few of those. We've had great success with UND at the special ed arena in creating that opportunity within. I think we have the structures in place, and I'm willing to assist and be that, I don't know what you want to use for the word here, but an opportunity where our greatest assets are in our hallways, and let's use them. Yeah. And we've been intentional about doing that. And I truly believe our next electrician is leaving today at 2 o'clock to go do his cooperative work experience. And he might be in my building in a year from now, hooking up power for me.
Yeah.
And you're really eliminating those barriers that we recently showed in regards to, we don't have any Starbucks here in town, but we got a coffee pot down in the teacher's lounge that is always on. So I'm going to put my contact in there. Feel free to call me. Both Dr. Johnson and Mike Heilman have my contact as well. So I'd be willing to assist in this process.
Yeah, that's terrific. I appreciate that. And Caitlin, somebody from the team, can you all grab that for me and just save it? Yes, Steve, what were you gonna?
That's a great opportunity. I'm close with Dr. Jane Downey out at Montana State University, and they have actually partnered with their rural research group there at the Montana State is partnered with their architectural college, and they actually design the efficient homes that could go into these rural areas and be a place for a teacher to stay. So they've got a two-part process, but I really like what Tyler is saying right now is we've already got CTE in place with a lot of what we have for the buildings trades area, and we could do some of this stuff and actually move that forward to help out with the housing.
Yeah, that would be great. We're hoping to apply for and win some funding from the university in the order of about $20,000 that would support this too. So aside from the research piece and the program, there's also ways that we can use those funds to support these initiatives. Yeah, I mean, so this is the kind of thing that we're just excited about. We really do want to do a lot of brainstorming. We want to do a lot of listening, and we want to just be useful partners. So if there's something that you all are curious about, we want to be helpful in that. I think we would love to, and there's different models moving forward. I think one thing that we would really love is partnerships with districts where we're just there. If you have a question and we just have, we either our team or we have advanced students in methods courses, whether we secure funding or do it separately from that, but where we can sort of have that sort of sustained relationship and are being a useful partner and extending UND beyond the Grand Forks kind of pocket. And one of the things we're doing to that effort, in addition to the research projects, is trying to have some events. So we are having what we're calling a Rural Education Policy Summit. Our inaugural one will be in December 1st. But we're hoping that this will be a yearly event, and the topic of it will change each year. And we're hoping that it changes to focus on what folks are thinking about, are caring about. So each year we'll have a different spotlight on an innovation. And this year's is innovations in teacher recruitment and retention. And what we're really hoping is, obviously everybody knows teacher recruitment and retention is an issue. We don't need more hand wringing. We just want to create a space where we're learning from the kinds of things that folks are already doing. So I think it was Steve who actually put me in touch with Ben. And so we were so excited to partner with him. And you see some faces here that you recognize on the panel. Steve and Mike will be joining us. The Teacher of the Year will be there. Yes, Caitlin, thank you. Put the link to register in the chat. We would love to have you. It's a free event. You do have to register to get the Zoom link. We hope that as many administrators and teachers can join us. I had a principal from one school touch base saying, hey, our teachers are wondering if this is a space where we can talk about what we're doing. Absolutely. That is the hope. I think that across the state, one of the things that we're learning in our research is that really exciting things are happening, but they're maybe not getting the attention. Folks around aren't hearing about it. And so we really want to be that space where we can think about how do we learn from one another, and then where can we come together to be more powerful. So that's what we have coming up. And that's probably all I have prepared, but I'm happy to chat more if you have thoughts or questions.
I have a question. To me, it's a fairly new phenomenon in the state where we're hiring foreign teachers to come in.
Yes. This is a project.
I don't know if there's much research out there on that particular issue, but it's most certainly going to be something that I think when we get on some chats once in a while, how do you do this and how do you do that? How do you make sure that they're licensed and all of those kinds of things? We have a couple of gentlemen that are on here that actually have hired some. So that might be a research project that would tie into this.
Yes, absolutely. That I could have easily talked about that too, of future projects. We're hoping in the spring to center some work on that, because I think it's another innovative space where we can see how folks are dealing with things like housing, thinking creatively about benefits. But then there's also questions that we have just about how that works in practice, right, in the classroom level. Yeah, so we'd love to learn from folks who are doing that and anything else.
Well, we're about 50 minutes into it, so we'd open it up for questions, and then I can sum this up and we can close her out. Is there any burning questions?
Yeah, you can see Caitlin put my email and hers in the chat, so you have our contact information. So yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out. And you'll be hearing from us again too over the next few weeks.
Well, before I stop the recording and stop the meeting, I just want to make the announcement that next month in December, on December 13th, we will have my good friend Ben Winchester will be on here. So if you don't get an opportunity to listen to him on the iRead group at the summit, you would get a chance there again. He does some really fun stuff. You get to hear some things about marketing your school and your community. And he'll tell you a lot about housing that many of you probably don't know that's real, but he'll explain that. So that's in the rewriting the narrative on the rural areas and recruitment of that. And then in January, we will have Apogee will be on, and that's a lot of schools are using Apogee. So they'll be in there, and I'm not quite sure the date yet, but I'll get that out after we do our December one, when we get that one organized. And then I probably about time that we start taking some time off, Mike, because we got that legislative session, and that's always fun.
It will be a fun legislative session. I mean, the word is out that there is money in the legislative coffers and the state coffers, and you would think that would make it easier, but typically when there's more money, it becomes more difficult. So it'll be interesting.
It's easier to say no than it is yes, right?
Correct. Well, Steve, I want to thank you, and Diana, thank you for coming on, and Steve for coordinating and organizing these meetings for NDSOS. We're going to continue to do them. I keep thinking about other partners and people we might even invite to these sessions so that they get to hear some of the things that are happening in rural schools. Information and sharing of information is critical, and hopefully this is helping us share some information and putting a spotlight on some of the needs we have in rural schools. Thank you.
Thank you.